Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book, author of Chorus of 1,000, now available on Amazon. And today we're going to be talking about The Story of a Soul by Saint Thérèse of Liseux. Little bit of a departure from the kinds of books I've been talking about recently on the channel in terms of this obviously being a nonfiction autobiography of a Carmelite nun. Little bit different than the works of Jean Wolfe, Ursula Le Guin, Austerlitz, Roberto Bolaño, books like that. But yeah, I read that. I just finished reading this, and I figured it'd be a great one to talk about. So Saint Therese, she is not only obviously a saint, canonized very quick. I think at probably a quicker process than is typical. She was canonized, I think less than 30 years after her death. She died in, I think, 1897. She was only 24 when she died, very, very young. And canonized 30 years later. And Pope Pius, I think it was Pius the 11th, who canonized her, and it's on the back of the book here. He called her, I believe the great, or it was Pope Pius the 10th, called her the greatest saint of modern times. Lofty praise, and I don't know when this would have happened, but she was eventually made a doctor of the church, a doctor of the Catholic Church, in an honor that is accorded to, I think it's 37 total doctors of the church. It's almost like an even more honorific title, and to be canonized is one thing, certainly, but then to be named a doctor of the church is almost an honor unto itself. Saint Therese, she is, probably one of the youngest, like in terms of age that she was when she died, 24 years old, probably I think the youngest out of all 37. And thus far, she's the most recent in terms of most recently lived. Nobody I think who lived in the 20th century has been honored with being a doctor of the church. I think Saint Faustina is one, Saint Jose Maria Escriva, he's another one, obviously. That one might not sit as well with some people, but there have been a lot of names. Her name escapes me, but a saint who was a scholar during World War II. She was raised. She was Jewish by heritage, was raised in Judaism, but then converted to Christianity, and I think she became a nun, but was executed by the Nazis during World War II. I think she's another one where there have been a lot of petitions for her to be made a doctor of the church. So there are at least three notable names of people who lived in the 20th century. People want to become doctors of the church, but as of this video, Saint Therese is the most recent, and she's known as the little flower. This book kind of has the subtitle "The Story of the Little Flower," and her, being a doctor of the church, being a teacher in that respect. She teaches what is called a little way, although maybe one of the great aspects of her story, I think, but also, it's maybe a little ironic in some ways too, is that she wasn't explicitly, a teacher. She wasn't somebody that had this great educated background. You might compare her, just hearing about her a little bit, to people like, and these names are mentioned so frequently amongst her own. She was very much aware of the idea of sainthood and living like a saint. And so she mentions Aquinas. mentions Augustine, mentions Saint John of the Cross, Saint Teresa of Avila, and I. So when you look of great scholarship, and then you think of Saint Therese, who, by comparison to some other doctors of the church, some of those other figures, her work, her output, I think there might have been a little bit more than this that she wrote. I heard that she wrote, there was a good amount of poems, maybe some hymns she wrote. I may be mistaken on that. But this is the core work. This is the primary work. It was a work that, it wasn't out of, I think, an ego or any high-minded ideas that she thought, that a work that she had written would not only be published, but would then profoundly affect and inspire the people who read it, to the point where she is, a pope. Many popes have referred to her as the greatest saint of modern times, and so clearly within this autobiography, which she wrote at the behest of a few other sisters of the Carmelite order, two of the three happened to be two of her literal biological sisters as well. Her story was written at their behest. Did they, would the exercise to write about one's childhood, one's spiritual journey, one's spiritual outlook, was that something that was common amongst their order? I'm not sure. Or was it just, for I think Sister Agnes, though her name, her Christian name, given name, whatever you want to call it, was Pauline, because the beginning here it says, for Mother Agnes of Jesus, which is what her sister Pauline, that was kind of the assumed name. When she entered the order, she became known as Mother Agnes of Jesus. And so, was this an act of sister to sister wanting her to just write about her life, understanding that maybe going through the hardship, maybe some of the spiritual hardship or some of the physical hardship, if that would put her at ease. So, she addressed, it's very much so, while it is an autobiography, it's almost like a letter of sorts to her sisters. And then the second sister within this it was a sister of the order. It wasn't one of her biological sisters. But she writes, so again, Thérèse of Liseux. She's French, grew up in France. I think was one of 8 or 9 kids, but about 3 or 4 died very young. And so it was mainly her and her, I think, 4 other sisters. And all 5 of them eventually became nuns. And so that's fascinating of itself. You have a family of 8 or 9, but 5 daughters who survive to adulthood, and all 5 of them become nuns. And then both of Saint Therese, both of her parents, their names are escaping me off the top of my head, both of her parents also became saints, and I think that they are the only spouses to be saints. So, that again, that's so fascinating. And then, she writes about kind of growing up being very, very effective. She writes of the great emotions she had, and that was something that her sisters would sometimes chastise for, which would lead to kind of an ultimate conversion point when she was young. But like any younger sibling does, as she kind of mentions, she looked forward to the great benchmarks of life, and one, obviously, for growing up in the Catholic faith, the Catholic Church, was receiving First Communion. And that was something that she so desperately hungered for, but maybe, wasn't, she knew she hungered for it. She knew that was a big part. And then when her sister Pauline, Mother Agnes, became a nun, she so desperately wanted to join her. So it was out of that kind of that sisterly, that sibling, love, adoration, respect, you know, that she wanted to she wanted to run to that. Um, she almost saw it as like a, not necessarily a benchmark to complete, um, but something to strive for. If you see, I mean, if you see an older sibling kind of reaching those benchmarks, it can inspire you away, and especially if you're close with that sibling. Um, as it is crystal clear that Saint Therese was, and she eventually gets to the point where, um, the conversion point for her is a point in Christmas where they get back from midnight mass, and her father kind of has a tradition of laying out these shoes filled with gifts and presents, and that he kind of says to himself, he says to himself, not knowing that two of his daughters are in earshot of him. He says, well, at least this is the last year. Like, it's kind of like it's a moment of exasperation, and I think this is after his wife has died, and so it's clear in this that her father as well. He had a lot of, she notes it as paralysis, so whether that's him having a stroke, I'm not sure. So he had some health problems of his own, so clearly under maybe considerable amount of duress, and so he just kind of says that, and Saint Therese gets very emotional, and her sister says, no, just don't cry about it, don't and don't go immediately and start opening these presents, and then you'll probably make her father feel bad. But then she does it anyway. I think to show graciousness, to show charity and love for the act of her father doing that, as a recognition of that. And for Saint Therese, she saw the love of Christ imbued within that act, within that act of charity. Though she doesn't, and this is towards the end of the first part of her narrative, of her autobiography, and she doesn't term it as I think as an act of charity, which becomes so central to what she calls her little way, her elevator to heaven, as she refers to it. But then she wants to become a nun, and hats off to her father, I guess, for being so supportive. When she was just 15, she wanted to join the order. And people in her family, she mentions an uncle who she talks to about it, who's kind of reticent, like, I don't know about that, but then he comes around to it. And then she makes a pilgrimage with her father, and I think her sister, to Rome. And she gets a chance to meet the Pope Leo the 13th. And when Leo the 13th, he's in kind of this receiving line, so all the pilgrims, all the individuals, the people who want to meet him, they can meet him, and he'll like either kiss his ring or kiss his feet or something, I don't know, but give him a quick blessing. And it's kind of like it's a receiving line, so they've got a lot of people to get through, and she can't help herself, and she just says, whenever, Holy Father, I want to join this order, because obviously, as the Pope, his will in acting through the bureaucracy of the church can kind of supersede and trump everything, any other potential naysayers. And the bishop reverend who she's with, who knows her, is kind of like, oh, she kind of admonishing her in the moment, and then she's kind of carried away. And I think the Pope just says, if it's the Lord's will, it will be done. And the Pope makes it clear in that moment that he kind of defers to the wisdom of kind of the regional authorities. Kind of says quickly to her in that moment, maybe it was a moment of annoyance. If it was an annoyance for him, I don't think it, at least from her recollection, that the Pope seemed kind of taken aback, she holding up the line and all that. But it still affects her, and she again is somebody who in this part of the narrative, and then as she gets into when she becomes a nun, when she becomes a Carmelite, she is she wants to live a life of a saint. She wants to aspire to that kind of greatness and that kind of adoration, in her mind, adoration of Christ. And but she doesn't know if she can. Because again, she refers to herself continually as the little flower, somebody who is, who might be in, or where she views herself maybe as incapable of kind of these great grand deeds that are so common. But as she becomes a nun, she realizes, and it takes a while to, that that the loving thy neighbor as oneself, which is, as Christ states, one of the greatest of commandments, as people kind of ask him for guidance in the Gospels. That's, love thy neighbor as thyself. And and then it clicks with her to act with charity, and through charity is love, in all of the kind of the little moments, the little annoyances, lending without the expectation of receiving, and again, lending with no intent of ever receiving anything back, or one could say loving without the ever receiving anything in return or anything back, just showing that to others. And she takes that to heart and knows, she has almost like a presentiment that she's not going to live long. And it was in that moment when it clicked, and she was able to write about not only that, how she acted, but then knowing that through, she wanted to pray for those, to pray for souls that she viewed it, pray for souls in purgatory, that they might be helped, that through that love could act, which she viewed as, again, Christ's love kind of working through her, and love, and then that love being all that really that ultimately mattered to her, and being kind of surrounded by that love being the ultimate end goal. And so she was content with the, it would frighten her a little bit at first, kind of almost accepting her mortality in a place where I don't even think she was sick at first, even though she, again, the last couple of years of her life, kind of, it was just a lot of health troubles. But then that again, that elevator to heaven she sought, that little way of charity and prayer and thought and acting through love, that kind of what others have described as that kind of self-sacrifice. You kind of you take the self out, you take your own inhibitions, your own annoyances, your own misgivings, or I don't really have a good relationship with this person, and they want me to help them with the and you might be like, excuses, but it's kind of the self surrender for her, acting through Christ's love, but again, and then she downplays it as a little way, but content that the little way is the way one can live, that one doesn't need to, could commit these great heroic deeds. And then that's, reading that, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense that this is why she is a doctor of the church. This is what she has taught. She has taught greatly that simple, that idea of love, charity, and through that love, charity is the self-sacrifice, the removal of the self, doing things for selfish reasons, and that's the kind of the completeness of it. And yeah, it's very warming. It's very warm to read this autobiography. It's very You'll feel good coming away from it and being like, okay, this is, I mean, it's very inspiring, because I suppose in a respect we all aspire to, we read, as readers, we read uh, the lives of great people. We hear of great deeds, and there might be a part of us that aspires to them. Um, but, you know, sometimes living in that respect is it's not just the big things, it is the little things, it is the little way. So yeah, this was great. And it's also great, just, it's the I think the qualities of her prose, she admonishes herself for getting off track, even though these digressions shed a great light on her character and her way of living. And I think there's at one point, I think it's in the first section of the narrative, where she says, this isn't going to be read by anybody. Just that, it ultimately, she's writing it because she was asked to write it. But then, was she asked to live that life of service, to asked then to, through her writing, realize and articulate the way she lived. And then when she was done with that, then she died. And, she had lived her purpose. That purpose was to live that, to discover that for herself, to write about it. And then she had her time. She had her time and absolutely made the most of it. So, absolute inspiration, I think. So, Story of a Soul, Saint Thérèse. If you have read it, let me know what you think. And as always, I will see you guys next time.